everybody. My name is Kendra Jarnigan. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm a coach for the Faster Way to Fat Loss. And I just wanted to do a little talk. Laura and I had talked a few months ago about macros. So first, I want to know what your questions are, because I have what I'm going to say, but sometimes what I think you need to hear isn't necessarily what you want to hear. So if anyone has any burning questions to kind of kick it off.
I just asked Laura what's a macro.
Oh!
I didn't know what this was.
Good. Then what I've got here
I may be the only one that didn't know.
Me too.
Okay.
Great. All right. Well, okay. So, whenever you've heard of calories, right? So your three biggest nutrients that your body needs are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And I'm going to add one more in there, and that's fiber. Okay, because fiber is extremely important for lots of different things. So we don't want to overlook fiber, but fiber doesn't necessarily make up our caloric intake. So to speak. Okay? So we're going to focus on the three: the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. Okay? We'll start with carbohydrates. Who knows what a carbohydrate is?
It's not good for him.
That's not true. Your body actually needs carbohydrates. Yes.
Good.
Your body actually needs probably more carbohydrates than any other nutrient, because your body needs it for energy. It actually, for women, it helps with hormones, and actually some kinds of carbohydrates is actually where you get more of that complex fiber, which is the good kind of fiber. Okay. So carbohydrates, you want to, and plus carbohydrates are also the main source of your fuel. I think I mentioned that. The problem is that they've gotten kind of a bad rap with all the diets like keto and things like that out there. And it's not necessarily that keto is a bad diet. It can be good if you do it the right way. But women need carbohydrates, okay? Even if women do go on something like a keto diet, they still need carbohydrates, okay? You just need it for your hormones, okay? So typically you would want your diet to, who tracks in MyFitnessPal? Anybody? No? Good. Okay, if you're tracking in MyFitnessPal and you're selecting your carbohydrates, they need to be anywhere between, I would say, 45 and 55% of your total caloric intake. Okay. So carbohydrates. Then, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are fruits. Vegetables contain carbohydrates, especially like potatoes and sweet potatoes. So they're not a bad thing. Okay. How we make them makes them bad. Or the things that we add to them makes them not good. Anyway, and then, there's breads. Beans contain carbohydrate. They also contain protein. Drawing a blank. Pastas will contain carbohydrates as well. Okay, so those are your foods that contain carbohydrates. Okay, so there's also simple carbohydrates and there's complex carbohydrates. Your simple carbohydrates are candy is an example of a simple carbohydrate. A complex carbohydrate would be like a potato. Okay, so usually you're going to want to focus on your complex carbohydrates. So that would be like your potatoes, other starchy vegetables. And then the fruits are a good thing. Don't let anyone tell you that fruit is a bad thing, okay? We just have to learn how to eat fruit, okay? Fruit is great at the end of a meal, and it can replace a dessert, and it can help stave off that sweet feeling that you sometimes have after you eat a meal. You're like, oh, I want something sweet. Go ahead and try to add fruit in. Make it just a habit to add fruit in after each meal. Okay, they're a good, healthy carb. You just have to do it the right way. one of the things that we say in the Faster Way program is no naked carbs, okay? That means that you wouldn't have a piece of fruit by itself. You would have it with either a protein source or a fat source, okay? So you could do like some strawberries and some nuts, or some strawberries and some nut butter of some kind, okay?
Why is that? Why is that?
Because, well, fruit any kind of carbohydrates can cause your blood sugar to go up. And if you don't have something to go with it, the fruit is a little bit higher. It'll really spike. Because, you know, if someone were to have a low glycemic or a low, if you ever heard of a diabetic saying my sugar's low, give me some fruit, you know, or usually they'll go to orange juice, but because it brings your blood sugar up so quickly. So if you're a normal person without diabetes or whatever, then you don't want to just have fruit as a snack in the middle of the day because your blood sugar is going to skyrocket, okay? And then it's got to come back down. So anyway, so you want to always try to have it with something. The protein and the fat kind of help it to not jump high so quickly.
I was also
a
told
good
that you're
question.
gonna have a dessert. You have it as dessert, right after your meal, like you were saying.
That would be the
and
best
not
time.
as a snack.
Right.
Because of how it absorbs your sugar.
Right. How it affects the sugar, that's exactly right. Okay, so the next one is protein. Protein is kind of all the hype right now. If you're reading any kind of health things, most everyone, you know, is focusing on making sure that you get your protein intake in. And that is a good thing because typically we undereat protein and we need protein. We need protein for building muscles. We need it for your it helps with your hair, your skin, your nails, you know, all those kinds of things. So getting a lot of protein in, or at least the amount that you need in, is important, okay? And so, you know, obviously protein is meat, eggs, fish, or seafood. And then there are some plant varieties that have protein as well. So beans, tofu, and edamame has some, and you know, and some things like that. I suggest, I'm not plant-based. I like animal meats, and the main reason is because they give all 9 essential amino acids that your body needs, okay? And you know, sometimes I find it hard to always get protein in. So I usually end up doing some kind of a smoothie, you know, or a shake in order to get that protein in. But my smoothies, they're not, I mean, they've got good things in them. They've got like a bunch of spinach in there. They might have a little bit of like a dark cherry or something like that. They're going to have like a cocoa powder, so it's the antioxidants from the cocoa powder can be good, a nut butter and things like that. So that's another way to get your protein in. But I usually have to have one of those a day in order to hit my protein intake. So tracking your protein is really important. If you don't track anything else, that would be the one I would track to make sure that you're getting enough of, especially if you're working out, and more so even if you're lifting weights and things like that.
How do you decide how much you need?
Typically 20 to 25%. So if you go into MyFitnessPal and you just select 20 to 25%, yeah. And then the next one is fat. How am I doing on time, Laura?
So with the protein, what kind of protein powder do you have?
There's a lot out there. You've got to be really careful with protein powder because they have so many fillers and gums and things like that in there. You want one that's more clean.
Do you add that to your smoothie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, I don't know. It just depends on if I'm running around. Sometimes I'll do, you know, 1.5 times the amount just to make sure that I'm getting enough protein in there. But I'll use like a collagen powder, but collagen's not the same as a protein powder. So I typically use a Hydra Beef protein powder, and I've used a bone broth protein powder, I mainly look for ones that have cleaner ingredients in them, that they don't have a bunch of junk that I don't recognize. If I don't recognize what it is, I usually don't eat it. So, and then the last one is fat. Fat is essential to most of what we need. And I know it's kind of gotten a bad rap over the years where everyone was doing low-fat diets and things like that. But it has, so fat provides your fatty vitamins, your A, D, E, and K, and your body needs those. You know, one of the things that people are usually deficient of today is vitamin D, and that comes from fat. So, and there could be reasons why your body's not absorbing it, but fat is not bad, but you just have to know what kinds of fats are good, okay? So avocados are a good fat, olive oil, and walnuts are a good nut to have. So the ones that you want to stay away from, though, are your trans fats. So that's going to be, you know, that's going to be in cakes, cookies, pies, you know. Now you can make them from scratch and make them better, though. So it's just mainly whenever someone else makes it, they're probably not going to be cooking with the right kinds of oils, because you can bake with avocado oil and you will not taste the difference. And that's the better kind of fat to bake with. Let's see here. Any questions on fat? Olives are good. So sometimes, so your red meats are going to have usually, unless you're getting the really lean cuts of red meat, your red meats most of the time will have like a higher fat content than something like chicken. And so if I'm having a chicken meal, it doesn't have a lot of fat usually, so I'll add like some olives on the side. So that I can get my good fats in there, because your body needs them. And I also eat a lot of nuts, which, you know. But hitting your fat intake can be difficult, because typically it's easier to go over your fat intake than it is to stay right where it needs to be. So that's something I would suggest you take a look at too. And so putting it all together, balance is obviously the key. So making sure whenever you're looking at your meals that you've got some carbs, some protein, and some fat. And then sometimes knowing what you need to add is also tricky. So sometimes you have to figure out where you are. That's where I would suggest tracking, if you can, in MyFitnessPal or one of those apps, just to kind of see, don't change anything, but just track for a few days and see, you know, am I over in fat? Am I over in carbs? Or, you know, how you're doing on things, because you just don't know where you are. And then take a look at take a look at what you're eating, because ideally you want to be eating just whole foods. Okay, things in a package or in a box are going to have a lot of other stuff in them. Okay, I'd rather you make it from scratch from home. I know it takes time, and I know we don't always have that time, but over time, if you do that even for a few weeks and then you go back to some of that packaged foods, you will see a tremendous difference in the way you feel, because that stuff can just really drag you down. It can mess up your digestion and that sort of stuff. So sticking as closely as you can to real whole food, increasing fruits and vegetables. I know it's a struggle even for me daily. That's the reason why I will shove spinach in my smoothie, because I know that I don't always hit that. And then good quality protein, and in a decent amount. I mean, you're probably looking at 3 to 5 ounces on your plate, and that's sometimes hard to judge. So if you can get a food scale, weigh it out, kind of learn what that looks like on a plate, it will really help you. And good fats, complex carbs for the fiber. And if you're looking at your plate, especially like if you could just at least focus maybe on one meal a day. If all of it's overwhelming, just focus on one meal a day. That might be something like dinner. Making sure that you have a good portion of meat. A 3-ounce portion of meat is about the size of the palm of your hand. I know everyone's palm is different, but that is in general. And maybe half of your plate is filled with fruits and vegetables. Okay. Sometimes I'll cut up a bunch of, kind of like broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage and carrots and all those, and throw them on a baking sheet with some oil and salt and pepper and things like that. And it's a good way to get a lot of vegetables in pretty quickly. So, any questions? Yeah.
Cheese, where does cheese fit in? I need a line, I don't know.
I struggle with cheese because cheese really does make things taste better, right? Salads, throwing it on, top of a burger or something like that. So I think you can do it occasionally, but I would try not to have it every day. It's usually pretty high in fat unless you're getting the low fat. And if you're getting the low fat, then you're probably getting a whole lot of chemicals and things like that that's, added in there. So I would try to just minimize it. I find it really hard to work in cheese to meet my fat intake. It usually always will throw me over. Nuts will usually throw me over, even though I love nuts. And it just depends on the day too. If I'm having more of a lean day, then I can add things in like olives, but not the cheese, So it just kind of depends on what you're eating.
What about the olive oil for cooking?
Olive oil is great for cooking.
We can heat the oil.
You can. I know there's a lot of controversy with that right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
if
why I'm-
you can ask 10 people, if you can heat avocado oil, and 10 people if you can eat olive oil, and it's gonna be a 50-50 split. So I think it's okay. I would try probably not to go over 450 with it. But yeah, I think olive oil is fine. Yeah, and the thing with olive oil is to try to get it single sourced. So sometimes you can look on the bottle and it's got like 4 or 5 different places on there. You want it from one. Good question. Yep.
What's the minimum calorie intake that you need to make sure that you're at least getting?
Don't go below 1,200.
Okay.
I usually probably even suggest maybe even a little higher, because if anyone's dieting without help, they're probably under eating, and that's that messes up your hormones, it messes up your sleep, it messes up your energy, it messes up all kinds of things. And if you're under eating, then your body's going to dip into your muscles, and then you're going to have some muscle wasting. So it doesn't dip into the fat like you think it will. It dips in. It starts burning those muscles, and then you get, it's called the skinny fat. You lose all your muscle mass, and it just becomes fat tissue. So, anything else? Well, if you don't have any more questions, I cover a lot of this stuff. We cover a lot of this stuff in our program, The Faster Way. And if anyone would like more information on that, you can put your name and email on here, and I can just send you information about it if you want. It's a 6-week program, and we cover all things. Yeah. And you can you can still, do all your exercising here and whatnot, and just have the guidance of nutrition if you're interested. Or if you have any more questions, I have cards up there too. You can always reach out to me about anything that you have questions about.